as law enforcement in New York City is preparing for the possibility that former President Trump could be indicted in the coming hours or days. We know that Trump took to Truth Social over the weekend to say that he expected to be arrested today. Now, I do want to talk more about those law enforcement preps, so let's bring in Joseph Giacalone, a retired NYPD sergeant, to talk more about that. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
All right, so first off, just tell me how the NYPD does prepare for something like this based in, your experience.
Well, this is certainly not their first rodeo in something that could be a pretty massive security issue. So what happens is, the basic planning is going to go down with what we refer to as the alphabet soup. So you have Secret Service, FBI, NYPD. Of course, you're going to have the court officers that are going to play a vital role in this too. And they started bringing in barriers last night. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if we start seeing some dump trucks, some garbage trucks in and around the area where they might block off some traffic. Just in case this happens, listen, they need to be prepared for the worst, because if it doesn't happen, at least they can say that, their preparation maybe deterred them from doing it.
So at this point, it's too early to tell because we really don't even know if that indictment is going to happen. We just know that Trump did say on Truth Social that he was expecting, based on some inside information, to be arrested today. But in a situation like this, are there normally protests that break out in areas like New York City?
Well, there might be, right? So it's, like I said, they'd be negligent not to be prepared for anything that would happen. The issue that comes down to is you have to take in consideration, person's lives and property and the subway system and people getting to work. And these are all kinds of things that keep police executives up at night, right? So there's a lot of planning that is happening probably right now as we speak. Yes, we don't know, first of all, if there is actually going to be an indictment. We don't know if there is, if they do indict him, they don't know exactly how they're going to process him. However, you don't wait for it to happen and then say, okay, what do we do now?
Exactly. And what do you think that Manhattan is going to look like today, just again, based in your experience? Obviously, each situation is fairly different, and the video you're looking at is from just yesterday. But what exactly do you expect the city is going to look like today?
Well, let's put it this way. I wouldn't drive a car down in Lower Manhattan today, that's for sure. I would stay away from it as possible. If you're working downtown, I would, take mass transit. Subway probably be the best route, because I think even buses will be slowed down with some of the traffic changes and, going towards the courthouses. You have to protect the courthouse. You have to protect the, 100 Center Street. You have Manhattan Supreme Court. You have all these different buildings that could play a role in this. And we don't know exactly what is going to happen. So, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if they ended up, in a different venue, just to avoid any type of complications or confrontations.
And we talked about this before we actually talked on air here about social media and how law enforcement keeps an eye on, possible posts that could be related to a protest or riot, anything of that nature. Kind of break that down for me.
Well, several years ago, the NYPD came up with a social media investigative team, and they call the internet and looking for possible threats or information about what might be happening and what's going on. It's, people post things online in public forums. It's there for everyone to read. So the police department does a pretty good job at doing that. And sometimes when you have people who do things, they just can't help themselves, and they just, make statements or report things. And then those things are taken very serious. So anything that would be viewed as threats to any individuals, elected officials, or what have you, they would be, investigated, making sure that this is not going to happen. And, if, God forbid, someone actually threatens to kill somebody or do something like that, they will pay a visit to their houses. And then that's just with the NYPD. It depends on who it is. But you have the Secret Service, you could have the FBI knocking on your door. It's just something that, you can say pretty much what you want, but when you start threatening people's lives, that's where everyone draws the line.
And one thing that's interesting to note, you see people saying, okay, well, law enforcement is getting ready. You have so many different agencies that are there in New York City and the Manhattan area. However, just because they're preparing, that doesn't necessarily equate to the fact that Trump is 100% going to be indicted, correct?
Correct, right. Like they're just preparing for it. If the grand jury decides not to indict, the case is over, right? So it's the district attorney will have zero ability to do anything after that. So everything is going to hinge on this group of people, which ranges in New York State anywhere from 16 to 23 jurors who are going to listen to basically the prosecution angle because it's seen as a prosecutorial tool. The defense doesn't really get to say anything or not say anything. And the issue that comes down to this, where the phrase comes from, that you can indict a ham sandwich. So I don't know exactly, we don't have a crystal ball and what's the jurors are thinking. We're going to just have to be patient and wait. But for security reasons, you can't wait on a decision that has to be made. You need to be prepared for it, and you need to be prepared for it as of yesterday. And you can see they were starting to do that already.
So in your experience in the NYPD and law enforcement in general, have you ever seen a situation of this magnitude? We're talking about a former president. I mean, he was in office there just, 2 years ago. So have you ever seen a situation of this magnitude?
Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, we've had terrorists on trial from 9/11. We've had, I'm dating myself, but, the old mafia bosses such as John Gotti and all those other guys. I mean, there were some big time court cases down in Lower Manhattan before. I'm not really worried about that aspect of it. And you know what? This might even pale in comparison to some of those terrorism cases way back when, about 15, 20 years ago. So I think that this is going to be pretty muted. I mean, there was a very small group of people outside the court yesterday. So I don't anticipate anything really terrible happening. But like I said, you have to be prepared for the worst.
Of course, definitely. All right. Well, Joseph Giacalone, thank you so much for joining us as always here. Anything you want to add about all of this before I let you go?
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, everyone is entitled to, peaceable assembly. That's all that, the law enforcement apparatus is asking, that if you're going to come down and protest, just do so peacefully, right? Don't, destroy things. I mean, there was a couple of fires set last night that they don't know yet exactly who set the police cars on fire, but I'm sure there's video surveillance. I'm sure they'll be releasing that soon. But that's the kind of, things that they worry about: property damage, people getting hurt, that kind of thing.
For sure. All right. Thank you again for taking the time to help break this down. Obviously, you have experience with, situations like this. So we appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to come join us.
Thanks for having me, Josh.